Good morning, viewers. My name is Sean Moyo for 263 Times. This morning, we host Mr. Douglas Monzora, the president of the MDCT. Mr. Monzora, how are you?
I'm okay, Sean. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
Very good.
Perfect. We host you today. We want to know more about Douglas Monzora, the man, the MDCT party, as well as everything that you stand for, since you are contending for power. So naturally, we would want you to express yourself to Zimbabweans and speak your point or your side.
Oh, thank you so much, Sean. I'm Douglas Monzora. I am the president of the Movement for Democratic Change, Tigray, having been elected at the Extraordinary Congress on 27 December in 2020. I started politics in 1988 as an activist, as a student activist at the University of Zimbabwe. Principally, we were fighting against the one-party state at that point in time. We were also fighting corruption. In 1989, I became the president of the Zimbabwe Law Students Association, ZILUSA. 1989, I also joined the Zimbabwe Unity Movement, which was an opposition party fighting against the one-party state, elected as Secretary for Legal Affairs. Then 1990, I was detained in Wawa prison for writing the constitution of the Zimbabwe Unity Movement. In 1991, I was headhunted by Morgan Tsvangirai as a legal advisor for the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Union, and I started working at the ZCTU in 1992. So I was a labor lawyer for the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions, and that's when we started the issues of the demonstrations and so on against the economic decline. In 1995, I tried to stop the Zimbabwean election that year on the basis that the electoral playing field was not even. We lost the case. In 1997, I again took the government to court over the constitutionality of the Political Parties Finances Act. We won the case. We were surprised to win the case, actually. In 1994, I had tried to write a constitution for Zimbabwe. It was called the Yellow Draft under Fordesi. So you can see that the constitution that we later wrote as part of COPAC is actually my third attempt at writing the constitution of Zimbabwe.
Okay.
So in 1998, I was a founder member of the National Constitutional Assembly, which was headed by Morgan Tsvangirai. I was in the task force of that National Constitutional Assembly. 2000, I headed the Untitled Chapter of the No Vote campaign against the Constitutional Commission constitution. In 2000, I was appointed together with Dr. Maduku by Morgan Tsvangirai to draft a constitution for Zimbabwe that he would implement if he won in 2002. And at that time we did the constitution, the National Constitutional Assembly draft. It was rejected by government. I have been a law lecturer at the Great Zimbabwe University and at the University of Zimbabwe. I also rose to be the deputy chairman of the National Constitutional Assembly, deputizing Professor Maduku. I then contested parliamentary seat for Nyanga constituency in 2005. I wasn't successful. In 2008, I won Nyanga North constituency for the MDCT. I was then appointed as the co-chair of the COPAC to draft the Constitution of Zimbabwe.
Yes.
In 2011, about 2 weeks after I had come from prison, I was elected at the Congress in Bulawayo in the Babafield Stadium as the spokesperson of the MDCT.
Yes.
2014, I was elected the Secretary General of the MDCT.
Okay.
That was the famous victory where
Yes.
I beat my brother Nelson Chamisa after he had had a superior number of nominations. And it was one of the major upsets that have happened in the political history of this country. I was then elected later as the president of the Movement for Democratic Change. Okay. After the Supreme Court judgment in 1997. My thrust has been to change the politics of Zimbabwe, to change the way we relate as political opponents, there's no need of name calling. There's no need of all this acrimony, all this hate that we see. We want Zimbabweans to differ in a civilized manner. That's why we are advocating for the politics of rational disputation and tolerance. And we are advocating for dialogue in resolving Zimbabwe's economic, political, and social issues. They can be resolved through dialogue. That is why, as the MDCT, we have been at the forefront of advocating for dialogue. It is in the best interest of the Zimbabwean people. It is the most responsible thing to do. It has a history of success. If you look at three times that Zimbabweans have embarked on dialogue, first ending the War of Liberation in 1979 with the Lancaster House Conference.
Yes.
That Lancaster House Conference was dialogue,
yes,
and it brought independence. And then after the Gokura Wundi massacres in Matabeleland, they had to sit down and talked it over, and they signed the Unity Accord, which brought peace in the land of Matabeleland as well as the Midlands province. So it succeeded on that score. In 2008, Morgan Tsvangirai won the election, but Mugabe refused. There was a lot of bloodshed, bloodletting, senseless bloodletting, I should say. 300 of our youngsters were killed in cold blood. But it ended with the dialogue under the auspices of the SADC. So
Yes.
3 out of 3. There is historic evidence that dialogue works, and that is the strategy that we've embarked on as the MDCT.
All right, perfect. That was a very concise description of the man and his party. Right, speaking of your election as the MDCT president, your election was marred by what we would say controversy and a lot of chair throwing, if I should say. We also saw your major contestant, Dr. Zanu Pf, being assaulted on camera. It was caught on camera. So what would you say about your position concerning regarding how you were elected? Because other contestants as well, including your VP, Mwonzora, as well as your chairman, Mr. Komichi, they also complained of an unfair playing field and a lot of malpractice when it comes to your election. So what would you want to say about that in relation to the larger picture of your position towards elections in the country?
Well, if you look at the contestants of that election,
Yes.
I was the most junior. Zanu Pf was the president, Mwonzora was the vice chairman, and Morgan Komichi was the chairman. I was only secretary general, so I was not in control. But before that election, I was asked on camera by a gentleman called Blessed Mhlanga on what my chances were.
Yes.
And I gave him a percentage. I said that it was 2 weeks before the election. I said I was going to win 70% of the vote. And a week before the election, he interviewed me again. And I said, I have revised my figures. I'm now at 75%. Come election day, I won the election by 83%. It was a genuine win. And if you look at the causes of the commotion of that Congress, it was the candidates, contesting candidates who were fearing to lose. I did nothing on that day. I did not advocate for assaulting of any person. I did not say anything. I just sat there in front and watching the proceedings. But
if I may interject, sorry, Mr. Monzora, you intimate that you were a junior to the rest of the contestants, but it would seem that after the Supreme Court ruling, you were effectively in charge of the party by being SG. For example, you were the one who was recalling MPs and councillors as well, and basically in terms of funding or the pocket of the party, you seemed to have been in charge, and that's how there were even allegations that there was money that was misspent, or that is not clear how it was spent, and it may not have been accounted for. And Dr. Pf particularly accused you of being shady with the finances of the party. So you were a junior, as you say, but you seem to be a junior in charge of the party.
Well, Secretary General is a powerful post. There's no question about that.
Yes.
And you are responsible for administration of the party. But coming to the issues of recalls, these were not done by the Secretary General. The Secretary General wrote the letters, but this was pursuant to resolutions there for recall, and it was collective responsibility. Then coming to the issues of finances, the SG of the MDC does not handle finance. And the constitution is very, very clear. The person who handles finance is the Treasurer General. Okay. And you know, in a party as big as the MDC, it is impossible to withdraw money using one signature. It is impossible. It cannot be done. The constitution of the MDC is derived from the constitution of the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions. And it's a very strong constitution when it comes to finances. The Secretary General spends the money. The Treasurer General pays the money. That's the simple accounting system that is there. So it is impossible to get the money out of the account using one signature of the Secretary General. That is why when the allegations were brought the first time, Dr. Kupe herself wrote to the police that they had no issues with the Secretary General. I was then surprised on the day of the election when people were advocating for my arrest. I interpreted this as a way of eliminating me from the race. It had nothing to do with the embezzlement of funds at all.
But
it was an intention that some had to get me
to disqualify you,
to disqualify me, to get me arrested. But the police have investigated. The police have not arrested me. And the MDC has a constitution. There is a national council. There is a national executive. No one has brought these allegations to the national executive. No one has brought these allegations to the national council because they know that the allegations do not hold water. It was simply a way of character assassination.
But going back a bit on that, you as SG then not being in charge of finances may not necessarily mean that you had no influence to influence how the finances went. So it's possible that using your clout and your influence, you may have made it possible for that to happen. Not that I'm saying, I'm simply trying to play devil's advocate here. That definitely the influence you had, and definitely you may overpower even, say, psychologically to someone who is a junior to you and cause that to happen. Is it not possible? In a political organization?
No. I'm not that character. I'm not that character. And I want to lay the facts straight.
Yes.
There were 4 signatories
to
the bank account. Dr. Kupe was a signatory. Dr. Morgan Komichi, the chairperson, was a signatory. Chief Ndlovu was a mandatory signatory. The mandatory signatory, principal signatory of the bank accounts of the MDC is the Treasurer General. I was a signatory, yes. But it was impossible to get money out of the party without the cooperation of the other people. And there are minutes to that effect on how the money was spent. In fact, what happened was my colleagues, fearing defeat, caused a postponement of the Congress, if you still remember.
Yes,
the Congress was supposed to be held before Christmas.
Yes.
It was then postponed to the 27th. It was a way of trying to increase their chances. And when they did that, it had financial implications. Some people had traveled, and we had to pay for their transport and so on. And those were the consequences of that postponement. It was something ill-conceived, but it was something that was legitimate that happened. But the police is there. The national executive is there. The national council is there. No one has prosecuted me because there is no case to answer. I am a lawyer. I am a veteran administrator. I was a veteran administrator having worked under Morgan Tsvangirai. The worst thing you can do is, when you are sure of your winning, is to do anything like that. I knew I was going to win. I was confident I was going to win. I had beaten, using the same electoral college, I had beaten Nelson Chamisa by almost 1,000 votes. And this was the same electoral college. And if you look at the figures, you will find that I beat my opponents by 800 votes. which means there is a critical mass that is always voted for me. But you also have to look at the margin, the electoral margin there. Somebody had 9 votes, somebody had 14 votes, and somebody had 100 votes, and I had 883 votes.
All right. Coming to the issue of numbers, Mr. Mwonzora, how many delegates were supposed to be present to vote versus how many actually were there, and were these numbers sufficient to make this a legitimate election?
Exactly, they were. In fact, I have heard this argument.
Yes.
When you calculate quorum, when you look at quorum,
Yes.
you look at quorum at the beginning of the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the meeting started around, I think around 4 p.m. And there was accreditation. And there was accreditation, and there was no problem about accreditation. In fact, Dr. Kube then declared that the Congress was open after accreditation.
Okay.
But then, when people started voting, it was very clear who was winning. And the other candidates started raising issues about the voters' roll. The voters' roll, the issue of the voters' roll was then dealt with by an independent electoral body.
But how would they be sure of who was winning when the votes were supposedly secret? How would someone assume that so-and-so is winning?
Yes. If you looked at the ballot paper,
Yes.
the ballot paper, the MDC ballot paper of that Congress, it was as big as an iPad.
Okay.
It was a very huge ballot paper. And if a person voted on top of the paper, you would know that they voted for Dr. Kope. If they voted below, you would know that they voted for Monzora. So it was very easy to estimate how the voting is going. And it's not like people were voting in silence. It was very clear. It was clear that Dr. Kope had won in Blawayo. It was also clear that in Matabeleland North, we were 50-50. In Matabeleland South, I won 64%.
In Mat South?
In Matabeleland South, I have always won Matabeleland South.
Okay.
And there is a historical reason for that. My blood relative, very, very close, comes from Matabeleland South.
Okay.
And I have always won in that region. But all our strategy was to win 30% in Matabeleland provinces, the 3 Matabeleland provinces.
Yes.
But you may also want to know that the provinces don't rank the same. For example, Bulawayo is the smallest province of the MDC's 12 provinces. It is the smallest because it has only 12 constituencies.
All right.
Martin North has 13. Mat South has 13. Manicaland alone has 26. Masvingo has 26. Harare is close to 20.
Okay.
And so I think 24 in Harare.
Okay.
So if you control the support this side of the country, somebody cannot upstage you on the basis of Matabeleland alone. But I didn't lose in Matabeleland. I lost 1 province in Matabeleland. We drew 1, and I won 1. Okay.
Speaking of Matabeleland, there also was a contestant by the name of Abednego Ncube. He was Abednego Bebe. My apologies. He was disqualified and eventually thrown out of the party during the process of the nominations and the nominations, basically. Some, including him, viewed that as political gamesmanship by yourself and other contestants, that he seemed to have been popular, and so you actually had to throw him out of the party in order to disqualify him from contesting.
I was not going to lose to Bebe, of course. I was not going to lose to Bebe. You see, this is the same electoral college that voted for me as Secretary General in 2014. And I beat a stronger candidate, Nelson Chamisa. He was not a weak candidate, and I beat him. And after beating Nelson Chamisa, Abednego Bebe comes and says that he was going to beat me. There's no question that he was going to beat me at all.
But since he never contested, we may never really know.
We actually can know. Mr. Bebe was not disqualified by me. He was not expelled by me. He was
by
expelled
the party, yes.
by the president of the party, Dr. Kupe. And it was after certain behavior that made him get disqualified. For example, he was bringing people who were non-members of the party to come to the Congress. And he was saying things which were against the party policy. So it was not so smart of him to do that when you are facing an election. Some of us who knew that we were marked were very, very careful on what we did so that we get to the election date. But he was disqualified legitimately, I think. And ordinary Congress is coming. If he wants to come to the party and he wants to contest, he can contest.
But he's no longer a member of the party?
Well, as of now, he has not applied to rejoin the party.
Okay.
He's not a strong man.
You contested for the SG's position for the MDC Alliance in Gweru at the Gweru Congress, which you lost to Charlton Wende. So your contestation at the MDC Alliance Congress in Gweru, which was then ruled against by the Supreme Court, would that not mean you actually endorsed the MDC Alliance as it is at the moment? Since you contested, had you won that position, would you have relinquished it?
Well, Sean, you have put two questions in one.
Okay.
So
first of all, maybe let's speak about the Congress itself.
The Congress in Gweru.
Yes.
The Congress in Gweru, Sean, was not an MDC Alliance Congress. The MDC Alliance has never had a Congress. The Congress in Gweru was an MDCT Congress. Of course, the MDCT was a key member of the alliance. So if you look at the resolutions of that Congress, they are very clear that they are MDCT resolutions. And if you look at the campaign material for Charlton Wende, for myself, for Chamisa, and so on, for Walshman Ngube, they were MDCT campaigns. So it was not the MDC Alliance.
Okay, but Professor Ngube, if I'm to interject, Professor Ngube and Tendai BT were out of the MDCT by then. They had come into the MDC Alliance as principals to the MDC Alliance, but they represented the MDC for Professor Ngube and PDP for Tendai BT. But they contested, would they have contested in an MDCT election when they were not MDCT members?
In fact, what happened is that Professor Ngube dissolved his party, the MDC, and rejoined the MDCT. And Tendai BT, if you look at the resolutions of the MDCT Congress of Gweru, you will find that there is a resolution for readmitting Tendai BT and Walshman Ngube into the party. They couldn't have been readmitted to the MDC Alliance. They would have been readmitted to a party that they had left. And the party that they had left was the MDCT. This is where the MDC, Mr. Chamisa's group is not honest with people.
But if I'm to correct you there, sorry to interject.
This is why they've lost most of the court cases, because this issue then comes out in the court case. Now, the loss to Charlton Wende.
Yes.
I am not a person who complains about losing, no matter how unfair it is. I did not complain about it. I did a handover takeover. I knew that this was a political maneuver against me, and as a politician, I did something about it. And here I am, I'm the president of the MDCT. You don't complain, you do something about it. And of course, the odds were stacked against me, ran up to the Congress. It was a very unfair Congress, manipulated. I complained about it. Mr. Chibaya brought the whole of Mukoba into that stadium and so on. But after the results didn't come in my favor, I didn't complain. I did a handover takeover to Mr. Wende. But the Supreme Court ruled that that was not a Congress. The Supreme Court ruled again that the Congress held by Dr. Kupe at Stanley Square was also not a Congress. Therefore, I lost nothing. I lost zero. The Gweru Congress, the 2019 Congress, was a non-event. I've seen my political opponents harping on that, that I lost. But I lost in a Congress that was not a Congress.
But losing nonetheless.
Then I won, yes. I won in 2014. I lost in 2019. I won in 2020.
Okay. You spoke of Professor Ngube coming back to the MDCT, but if my memory serves me well, Professor Ngube was never at any point a member of the MDCT. Professor Ngube was a member of the MDC-M when the initials were put in. When the MDC split, it went with MDCT and MDC-M. So Professor Ngube would not have come back to a party that he was not a member of. He was never at any point an MDCT member, if I'm to be correct.
MDCT is actually an election acronym. The party is called the MDC symbol. That's why you see if you go to the constitution, it's MDC. It's not MDCT.
Okay.
We say MDCT to distinguish it from the other MDCs. Professor Ngube dissolved his party. He was welcomed at Gweru. There was a resolution, a Congress resolution welcoming him and readmitting him to the party. The same to Tendai Biti. By that, Tendai Biti then lost his presidency of the PDP. That's why you saw him being recalled, not by myself. He was recalled by Lucia Matibenga.
Okay. Mr. Monzora, if today the president of the nation, that is President Mnangagwa, were to call an election, you as Mr. Monzora and your party as the MDCT, are you ready for elections, and how do you fancy your chances?
We are ready for elections, Sean, and we are the most underestimated political outfit on the land right now. And I am the most underestimated politician on the land right now, despite my successes against my opponents. First, in internal elections, I've beaten them. Second, in a political strategy, we have won. Now, we hear people saying that we are not ready for elections and so on. First of all, we are ready for elections. Secondly, we have been having meetings, restructuring meetings.
Yes.
Both Mr. Chamisa's party has been having those meetings. Yeah. My party has been having those meetings. Zanu Pf has been having those meetings. And if you look at the attendances, you will find that we are attracting more people. Now, if you go to the Afro Barometer, the report, the Mpoi report,
yes,
you will see that the Mpoi report does not mention us. It mentions Mr. Mnangagwa, it mentions Mr. Chamisa, and so on. Now, but the people who wrote that report sort of inadvertently pointed to me winning. How? The 73% of Zimbabweans, the Zimbabwean people, want dialogue. 73%. And the people who are associated with calling for dialogue are ourselves. 51% of Zimbabweans think that holding elections under these conditions without reforms, it will reproduce the same result that people have been complaining about.
Speaking of reforms, right? At the moment, the MDC in all its various formations and in Parliament, whether it's Alliance or MDCT, it's quite small to initiate reforms within the system. So how are you possibly going to make those reforms without the control of Parliament, number one, and the opposition being in a very weakened position? This is clear for right now. The opposition as it is quite weak compared to its opponent, the ruling party. So how on earth are you going to initiate those changes from the outside and with such small influence?
That is why, Sean, my party has been calling for dialogue. It is possible to win electoral reforms using dialogue, because when you are dialoguing on the dialogue table, there is an artificial equality that is there. There is equality. You are talking as equals, and you can win certain things. You must be prepared to give in on other things as well. So dialogue is the only method that you can have these electoral reforms. And that is why you have seen us going to the president and going with proposals for dialogue that we have tabled to him, and he has said that he's going to respond. That is the only way you can get reforms. There is no other way. Mr. Chamisa's method doesn't work. He has been trying to call for demonstrations. They have been poorly attended. That's number one. Number two, you cannot call for demonstrations under these conditions without looking irresponsible. So, given the political health conditions in the country,
yes,
the only viable method is to use dialogue.
I don't want to say friend, but one of your staunchest critics, Professor Moyo, who's currently outside in exile, is on record as having said that the ruling party would never reform itself out of power. So now, what are the chances that the ruling party will accede to reform when there's a possibility that it would lose power? Why would it be even moved to reform?
Why should we listen to Mr. Jonathan Moyo?
No, the point being what he made, that the ruling party can never reform itself out of power.
He is not a success story. Politically, he is not a success story. They were outmaneuvered from Zanu Pf by the other factions. They were a faction of they were the G40 faction, there was the Lacoste faction, and there was outmaneuvering of one another.
Yes.
And they lost out.
Yes. No, but the point being, he said, that's what's important, that the ruling party can never reform itself out of power. And you want to initiate reforms to a party that is on record as having said they can never reform themselves out of, which would make sense in politics. Yeah. So why would they now be moved to reform?
He is wrong, because there is evidence that dialogue has worked before. Dialogue worked in 2009 to 2013 when we were doing the constitution. We won quite a lot of things that Zanu Pf did not want. And we won them over the conference table. So a dialogue properly executed would generate what we call a win-win. Yeah. It will not be a complete win for the MDC, it won't be a complete win for Zanu Pf, but it will be a win-win. It will be a fair outcome. Okay. But in doing that, you have incremental gain. Now, if we go to Professor Jonathan Moyo, what he has said, yes, what is the alternative that he is suggesting? There is nothing he is suggesting. The alternative would be what he has been supporting, call for demonstrations and so on. It has not worked. Clearly, it has not worked. So he cannot discourage what we are trying to do. Let dialogue happen and see whether we will not gain something out of it.
First of all, for dialogue to happen, my understanding is there would have to be enough compelling reasons. Say, for example, in 2008, when the MDCT won the elections, we may argue on whether they won it overwhelmingly, but they did win, and it's on record, and everyone admitted that, including the ruling party. And so there was a compelling reason for the ruling party to negotiate then. But at the moment, with the state of the opposition, what compelling reasons would the ruling party have to dialogue? That's where the question really is. Why would they want to dialogue when they have nothing to lose, as it were?
Well, first of all, if you go to the political actors in this country,
yes,
and let me confine them to three.
Yes.
President Mnangagwa, Advocate Chamisa, and myself.
Yourself, yeah.
The three of us have talked about the need for dialogue. The president himself has talked about the need for dialogue. Advocate Chamisa has talked about the need for dialogue, but wants to exclude other people from the dialogue. I have called for inclusive dialogue. So the common denominator of the political actors is that we agree that there is need for dialogue. It is not true that there are no compelling reasons for Zanu Pf to engage in dialogue. First of all, Zanu Pf knows the political and economic conditions of this country.
Yes.
It knows the crises, the various crises in this country, the crisis of poverty, the crisis of the economy, the crisis of contested legitimacy.
Yes.
After every election, people argue about the result.
Yes.
They should be worried about that. They are also worried about the crisis of international re-engagement. And if people are dialoguing, if Zimbabweans are finding one another, if Zimbabweans are reforming themselves, then it's a compelling reason to the international community to re-engage Zimbabwe. Okay. So Zanu Pf has a lot to gain out of dialogue. Also, it is theoretically possible to win an unfree and an unfair election. And if the Zanu Pf was to lose power under these circumstances, with this system, it will be a victim of the next government.
True.
And violence, dialogue will help us forestall that. And let me take an opportunity here to say that we need to change the way we are doing our politics. That is why I am not a supporter of what is happening in South Africa right now. Their treatment of their former president, they should have managed it better, because it sends wrong signals for people, and it discourages people from leaving power. So there must be a certain measure of respect, a certain measure of decorum with which you treat the former head of state.
Okay.
But of course, that's not to say crime must be condoned, but
yes,
there must be management of issues like that. Yes. So Zimbabweans have to find one another. President Mnangagwa, Vice President Chiwenga, the leaders of Zanu Pf are not growing upside down.
True.
They are growing. And in 10 years' time, they may not be the leaders of this country. In 5 years' time, they may not be the leaders of this country. In 2023, they may not be. And it is important that we set our political and economic system such that it would not matter who the president is. Everybody should feel safe in this country. Yes. Everybody should feel that their rights are protected, that they are respected, their property rights are not abrogated. And this is the essence of dialogue. We stand to benefit. Zimbabwe stands to benefit from dialogue. Fortunately for the MDC team, we are ready for dialogue. We have put together a team that is spelled out the issues that have to be dialogued upon. And we have also put in our position on each of the issues. And it gives us a good starting point when we dialogue. And this dialogue is so that Zimbabwe is better for everyone. Yes. So it is dialogue in the best interest of our people. It is different from the other political approaches, scorched earth. Trying to achieve a win-lose won't work in this country, either for Zanu Pf or for other political parties. It won't work, but a dialogue will.
Diverging a bit from the politics and going into economics, because as a political party, naturally, you would have an economic standpoint by which you would want to govern in the event that you win power. So what is the MDCT's fundamental or common denominator economic policy? Zanu Pf, since the turn of the millennium, has been going under the theme, the land is the economy. And also by that, then they extend to indigenization and empowerment. What is the MDCT's fundamental economic policy that it can say this is the bedrock of what we want to push in Zimbabwe if we are to get into power?
That's a very important question, Sean. But you know, of course, that Zanu Pf was wrong. The land is not the economy, and the economy is not land. If the land was the economy, Japan will not have a bigger economy than Zimbabwe when it is geographically smaller than Zimbabwe. Belgium will not have an economy bigger than Zimbabwe when it is almost the size of Matabeleland.
True.
Now, the land is not the economy and the economy is not land. Zanu Pf was wrong and Zanu Pf is wrong. Now, the most fundamental thing about the MDC economic policy is to open up the economy and to re-engage with the international community so that Zimbabwe is a friend of everyone. It is not a friend of the East or the West and so on. It is a friend of everyone. We then invite investment and make sure that those people they are guaranteed that their investment is safe. Zimbabwe is endowed with a lot of important things. A good road infrastructure, for example, not the quality of the roads, but the road infrastructure, the layout itself is very, very good. Yes. Good climate, a hard-working population, an educated populace. Yes. So our economic thrust will be an inclusive growth that leaves no one behind. We must have an economy that will look at the involvement of all the people in the economy, involvement of the poorer members of society in production, whether of goods or of services. Everybody must be working, everybody must be producing something, and we must enable people to produce. Therefore, we will move a little bit for affirmative action for the youth, because they are the bedrock of the future. The women, their involvement in the informal sector, it is also very good for the economy, and the big business as well. So there will be policies aimed at boosting big business and supporting big business. Small scale enterprises actually form the bedrock of most economies. The American economy, for example, is sustained by their small sector. So the SMEs, we are going to be promoting that. And with the coming in of investment, we will have enough money to devote to raising the economy. Now, we are also going to sort the politics. Here in Zimbabwe, the politics affects the economy. Mugabe's disastrous politics affected the economy. The country, we have sanctions, we have capital flight, we lost investment to the neighboring countries. Our farmers are in Zambia, some of our farmers are in Zambia, some are in Nigeria, doing very well. So that politics affected the economy. So we will sort the politics so that we remove the politics of hate, rancor, acrimony, and replace it with the politics of rational disputation. Now, if we do that, we then reduce what is called by economists the country risk factor, which is what investors look at when they want to invest in a country. We reduce that by sorting out the politics.
Risk factors,
Our party will not have time for retribution. We don't want to be involved in retribution and so on. We will make sure that the historical imbalances are redressed. We will also make sure that people, victims of political violence, are compensated. It's not good enough to continue talking about Gogora Hundi without doing anything about it. The whole communities were disadvantaged. People do not have documentation in Matabeleland, and half of their working population is not in Zimbabwe. And yet Matabeleland is quite rich. We have to make sure that as part of compensation of the community, you sort out the water problems, you put irrigation and so on, and you boost the economy of Bulawayo so that there is work with these people can get. But you also make sure that those people who are disadvantaged have proper documentation. But some, because of a failure to get proper documentation and losing their loved ones, did not go much in terms of school
education.
In terms of education, we have to then make sure that those people are assisted so that they can be economically productive and self-sufficient.
So on the issue of land, what is the MDCT's policy? The land was taken from the previous owners, that is the whites, who had the documents of the land. What is the MDCT's policy on the land, number one? Number two, on the issue of compensation of the former white farmers, the current government has initiated a process to compensate them. Where does the MDCT stand on that?
Yes, the policy on land, the land issue, Sean, is almost settled now. And it was settled by the constitution that we wrote in 2013. But a few things remain, and it is securitizing the land so that the land is not dead capital. Right now the land is there, but it's dead capital. So one cannot take an offer letter to a bank to go and get money. So I would think that a system of title deeds is called for. So we will have a system of title deeds. We won't reverse the land reform, because that will generate problems of its own. But we will de-racialize the land issue. So white people who want to farm are free to come and farm. Indian people who are Zimbabweans who want to farm are free to farm. And all the communities, all the smaller communities in this country must have access to land. But of course the land must belong to the majority of the Zimbabweans. But it must not be land that people take in order to admire. It must be land that is put to productive use. And we will, of course, have a program to make sure that the land is put to productive use. If you can't use the land, then you lose it to people who are more deserving. There is a lot of land that is lying idle. People just are happy that they are controlling large tracts of land, but they are not using the land. We wanted the land to be used. Compensation. We in the when we were in the COPAC, as the MDC, we supported compensation,
yes.
Full compensation.
Yes.
But when we did the negotiations, there was then for white people it was compensation for improvements only, and not for the land.
Yes.
For black people it was compensation for both the land and improvements. And it was a compromise position. Now, the government is compensating the white farmers.
Yes.
It had an agreement with the white farmers. I fundamentally disagree with that approach. The government must negotiate with all farmers who lost their land, whether they are white or black. And we have people who lost their land for political reasons. Ndabaningi story, it is churu farm taken by the government. Absolutely no compensation. And there are people I know, my brother Siposan Malunga.
Yes, currently going on. Yes.
Yes, there is a problem.
Yes.
There at his farm and so on. If he is to be compensated, it is for the whole land and the improvements. But there is one subgroup that must be compensated that the government has not looked at, and that is the black farm workers who lost their employment, means of livelihood, because of the government policy of land reform. And these people were mostly the poorer members of society, and they had no other means of livelihood except their labor power. They have to be compensated. They have to be set up, and the government must set a fund to compensate the black farm workers. Okay.
Two last questions, Mr. Mwonzora. For want of time, I know you're a busy man, you have a lot of places to go. The first of the last questions would be, there have been reports that the MDCT may choose to enter the next, either the by-elections or the elections under the banner of the MDC Alliance and not MDCT. First, can you confirm that as being factual? And secondly, would there be any basis for that?
Well, first of all, the MDC has not come to that yet. It's a debate that is happening within the party, and it's a debate that we encourage. But if you go to the law, the MDC Alliance is not a political party. It is a group of political parties established in terms of an alliance agreement signed on the 5th of August 2017. And it says the MDCT is the principal member of the alliance, of course, on the basis of its size.
Yes.
And it also says that the leader of the MDCT is ipso facto the leader of the alliance. And I don't see where some of my colleagues within the opposition are getting it wrong. It's there in black and white. Tsvangirai was the leader of the MDCT. He was the president of the alliance. Chamisa became the leader of the MDCT, illegal of course, but by that effect he became the leader of the alliance. And whoever becomes the leader of the MDCT is the leader of the alliance. Now, the strategic question on whether we are going to field using the alliance or not, it's a strategic issue that our elections department, the chairman's office are going to look into it. But there is nothing that stops us from using the MDC Alliance should we wish to use it. But it will be a strategic decision that we will use. Okay,
in the event that you would settle to use the alliance, the alliance was made up of several parties, as it were, the PDP of Tendai Biti and the MDC of Professor Ngube and Transform Zimbabwe and others, if I'm to be corrected, if I'm wrong somewhere there. Those principles, except for Transform Zimbabwe, are now in the MDC Alliance. So where would you get the basis to redo an MDC Alliance when there are no other principles who were signatory to it?
You have talked about two people who are now in the MDC, what you are calling the MDC Alliance.
Alliance, yes.
By that you mean Mr. Chamisa's party.
Yes.
It's 2 out of 7. If by your analogy, it's 2 out of 7 because the alliance had 7 partners. But Tendai BT has lost the presidents of the PDP to Lucia Matibenga. And that is why he was recalled by Lucia Matibenga. Professor Nube dissolved his party, of course, but Transform Zimbabwe has been non-committal. The Transform Zimbabwe actually, from what it has been saying, it wants to go it alone. And there is its promotional material by its leader, Mr. Ngaruvume, is to that effect. And that relieves the majority of the MDC Alliance there. It is not true that Mr. Chamisa is controlling the majority of the alliance partners. He is the minority. He is one party. And he is not the leader of the MDCT. The leader of the MDCT is there, was elected by Congress following a Supreme Court ruling. That is the party that is in the alliance. Mr. Chamisa's party is called the Citizens Convergence for Change, the CCC. But we all know what
is that a party though, or is just a moniker they are using on social media?
It is a party. They are testing the ground. It is a party. It is their name, and they call it CCC, the Citizens Convergence for Change. But we all know that CCC stands for Chamisa Chete Chete. But the problem with their party is that it is under the control of the G40, under the control of Jonathan Moyo and company. Jonathan Moyo and company are not helping the Mr. Chamisa's party because they respect you. They are controlling it so that they piggyback on the support, so that they exert revenge on their former colleagues in Zanu Pf. That's why we fundamentally differ with them. They want to manipulate the opposition. They had their chance to run the affairs of this country. They ran down this country. They brought IPA, they brought POSA, and they brought a brand of politics that I want to get rid of. The politics of hate. If you look at the writings of those people, it's full of hate, it's full of anger, it's full of acrimony. And they inherited it from Mugabe. In 1985, Mugabe says to Ngomo about ZAPU, it's a dissident party. And about Joshua Ngomo, he is the father of, he is a dissident father. And so on, this approach towards political opponent based on hate. So we see a lot being written on the social media, a lot being written in the mainstream media. But if you look at it, if you reduce to what they are saying to the lowest terms, they are propagating hate. And we want to get rid of hate.
Last question, Mr. Mwonzora. Your party participated in the constitutional amendment number 2, am I correct? Yes. The amendment which undid what you initially, personally, as a co-chair of COPAC and also now as president of MDCT, what you had stood for, that the president must not appoint the highest officers of the law by himself, but rather they must go through public interviews. Yes. And your party supported the undoing of that process and giving back the powers, imperial powers as it were, to the president, and he was very quick in actually utilizing that very clause, that new amendment, to reappoint Luke Malaba as Chief Justice. What's your standpoint in regard to how you seem to have reversed on what you had stood for all along?
Fortunately, I was the constitution maker, and in the constitution that we did in 2013, we provided for the women's quota, we provided for devolution, we toyed with the idea of the youth quota, we toyed with the idea of the women's quota in council. We also talked about the running mate. We also talked about the extension of term for the judges. Now, when this amendment came, it came with 6 issues. The first issue was to extend the life of the women's quota. by another 10 years. So 60 more seats of women in parliament. We had put that in the constitution because we wanted the advancement of women. And this was coming to an end in 2023. And we supported, of course, that quota be extended. We also realized that the amendment contained the youth quota. We have been saying, and I have been saying as the leader of my party, that the youth are the leaders of today, not the leaders of tomorrow. And here's an opportunity of the youth being elected into parliament. It's a small figure. 10 more people in parliament are going to be youth. We supported that. There is the issue of devolution. We support that. The issue of the women's quota in council. We want to advance the rights of our women in council. We support that. So we supported 4 out of 6. Now, we did not support the extension of the lifespan, the term of the judge.
CJ.
Yes, we did not support the running mate. And I am on record in the Hansard as arguing against that. In fact, some of the lawyers who later argued the case used my arguments word for word in parliament. But when it came voting time, now, when you are voting at the last stages, you vote either yes or no to everything. So if you voted yes, you are voting yes to everything. Voting yes to running mate being removed, voting yes to voting yes to running mate being there,
extension of the
extension of the terms and everything. If you vote no, you are also voting no to the things that you wanted.
But
the final judgment by the MDC was that there were 4 issues out of 6. Don't tell me, Sean, that you think that the women's issues are less important than the extension of a judge's term by age limit by from 70 to 75. I will say the interests of 52% of Zimbabweans are better. You cannot say the running mate is more important than the youth quota, because I can point to you that the youth are the future of this country. They have borne the brand of abuse by the politicians. It's high time that they occupy political office as well. So we had a political judgment to make. And we, of course, I voted no against the amendment number 2. I voted no.
Okay.
But most of the MPs of the MDC are women who were elected under the proportional representation. Now, what my opponents are saying is they wanted me to whip those women to vote against themselves. How could I whip people to vote against their own gender? How could I face the youth in my own party by rejecting that they be represented in parliament?
But
so there was a value judgment.
By having this, sorry, let me just rephrase. By having this fruit that has many aspects, would you not have been consuming a poison fruit by you choosing to focus on the youth and the women's issues that you speak of, but not really focusing on the bigger picture or on the more expansive and extensive power that those other 2 amendments?
The extension of the term of judges is not a bigger picture, Sean. The representation of women, the equitable representation of women in this country is a bigger issue. The running mate clause is not bigger than the youth quota. And if anybody doubts that, let's ask the youth, let's ask the women. But unfortunately, you see, when this amendment came, we were faced with two choices. The first choice was to abstain, to stay away. Now, that is boycotting, and it doesn't work. Zanu Pf controls the majority anyway. The second one was to try to change those things that we did not want. And for your own information, we stopped the parliamentary proceedings on 2 occasions because of those 2 clauses. The first one, I asked for the division of the House. And we were beaten. I think it was 19 to 44 or something like that. Because at that point, you need simple
numbers,
majority.
yes.
And the chiefs tend to vote with Zanu Pf. the two disabled representatives tend to vote with Zanu Pf. So we lost, and then the next day we did the same in an effort to change these two clauses. I even went to the extent of engaging the minister himself that the extension of the term limit of the judges was wrong because it was unconstitutional, and you will be taken to court and you will be defeated. And this is what happened. But our opponents chose to ignore that. We did not choose to boycott, we chose to fight on. We fought and we were defeated on the two clauses, but we safeguarded the four. So I safeguarded the integrity of the Constitution. Any alternative of that was that the Constitution was going to be seriously decimated.
Finally, I know we don't get to get you every day, Mr. Monzora, so you will ask my patience. One more question. Before I ask the last question, what's your message to Zimbabweans?
Zimbabwe belongs to everybody who is in it. Yes. Whether you come from Manicaland, Matebeleland, Midlands, Masvingo, Mashonaland, it doesn't matter. It also must not matter what the color of your skin is. This is our country together. And we must handle this country as responsible as we can. We must make sure that Zimbabweans are at peace. We must make sure that Zimbabweans enjoy the prosperity that their land has. We have a lot of minerals, we have rich farmland, we have flora and fauna. We are rich in flora and fauna, and we have great potential. We need to grow this economy. Our ambition is to make Zimbabwe the economic and commercial hub of the African continent. And we can do it. This Zimbabwe can turn out to be a little Japan. It can turn out to be a little paradise once more. It was a paradise before, it can be paradise again. But if we handle it responsibly, we have to change our politics. Gone are the days of politics of hate, propaganda, acrimony. We must now go to the politics of rational disputation. We must take care of our young people. They must have a stake in this country. Our women must have a stake in the governance of this country. And lastly, we must make sure that Zimbabwe is re-engaged with the international community. Those people targeted by sanctions are not suffering the consequences of the sanctions. They are building mansions in Glenlawn, Borodale, and what have you. They are benefiting from the sanctions. So the sanctions don't help us anymore. They are hurting the common man. But this country can be sorted, the problems of this country can be sorted via dialogue. And we invite Zimbabweans to accept our message of dialogue, so that there is no unnecessary fight between kith and kin. My enemy is not Emerson Mnangagwa, my enemy is not Chiwenga, my enemy is not Chamisa, my enemy is not BT, my enemy is not Ngube, my enemy is not Jonathan Moyo, my enemy is poverty, my enemy is deprivation, my enemy is joblessness, my enemy is the failure of Zimbabwe to get enough capital to develop itself. My enemy is that which makes Zimbabweans miserable. That is what we must concentrate on, and not on personalities.
Okay, and finally, the MDC Alliance candidate at the last elections, at the presidential elections, Mr. Chamisa, got, by official figures, he got 2.1 million votes. But unofficially, the MDC Alliance claims he had 2.6 million votes. So let's just stay with the 2.1 million official votes by ZEC. Do you see Mr. Mwonzora, and do you see the MDCT garnering 2.1 million votes?
Mr. Mwonzora will garner more than that. Of course, we are going to win. And we have beaten some of these people you are talking about internally at a smaller scale. Why cannot I not repeat the feat on a larger scale? And the message that we are carrying to the nation of Zimbabwe, the message of dialogue, is a message that the people of Zimbabwe want. But just to answer your question again, Sean, Mr. Chamisa went into that election as the president. He had a secretary general who is responsible for planning, who is responsible for strategy, who is responsible for making sure that you put together the manifesto, the policy documents. He had that person, and that person is Mr. Douglas Monzora. He had a chairperson who was in charge of building the party, and that was Morgan Komich. He had a vice president who assisted him, and that was Elias Mutsuri. How much of our effort do you credit us with on that 2.1 million? Why do you say that 2.1 million belongs to one person? I went and campaigned in Manicaland, and Manicaland was the only rural province that won both the presidential election, according to ZEC figures. 296 for Advocate Chamisa, 96,000, 292,000 for President Mnangagwa. We won in Manicaland. Now, how much of my effort do you credit, do you consider when you are looking at the 2.1 million? So it is wrong to look at a presidential candidate as an individual. And this is what my friends within Mr. Chamisa's party has been seeking to do. They've ignored the individual effort. Even in 2008, Morgan Tsvangirai didn't win alone. He won because Tendai Biti was there, Douglas Monzora was there, Nelson Chamisa was there, and we were working as a team. And when we went to the election of 2018, we were working as a team. Now, somebody wants to claim the credit on his own. And I think Alec Macheso has a song on that when they went to prepare the field, they did it together. And when they grew the crops, they grew together. But when the harvesting time came, somebody asked, who is the owner of this field? Somebody said, it's only me. That is wrong. I think that we have a good chance come election time. We are terribly underestimated. And we kind of like it because we will surprise our colleagues. Our colleagues were thinking that we are afraid of by-elections. I have initiated a process of candidate selection within the party. And what they concentrated on doing is not to look at the message. It was to concentrate on the grammar and see whether the letter looked to the one for Zanu Pf. It was not the same, but it had similar paragraphs or sentences because it was dealing with a similar problem. The MDC collects its candidates from the provinces. Zanu Pf does the same. And there is a tendency in both parties for the provinces to impose. So we were dealing with the same issue. So you will see similarity there. But my opponents were concentrating on that triviality. They were ignoring the fact that Mr. Monzora and his party are readying themselves for the election that they say we are afraid of. And we are going to win. So on record, the MDCT is not afraid of elections? Certainly not. Mr. Monzora. We want to take over governmental power in Zimbabwe through peaceful, democratic and constitutional means, through the modicum of free and fair elections. We think that we must have reforms first, and then we have our elections. And these reforms, we can get them via dialogue. Thank you so much to our viewers and our listeners. That was Mr. Douglas Monzora, the president of the MDCT, in conversation with me, Sean Moyo, for 263 Times. Thank you so much. Catch you on the second episode.